I actually wasn't sure that I'm going to be the last talk, so no pressure here. So good day, everyone. My name is Ruslan Zavacky, and a brief intro to myself. I've started my career as a software engineer here in Latvia around 12 years ago, and worked in probably as a lot of other people in small companies that we didn't call back then startups, just companies. Did some PHP, JavaScript, and there were no fancy frameworks, nothing like that. And before I moved away from Latvia to UK, I was working in e-commerce. And if you would ask me now, would you consider yourself working in a cybersecurity field, I would probably say no. Because, yeah, it's something that, oh, 1 second, I need my mouth, yeah. So, it just like wasn't something that I was like preparing myself for. And interesting enough, I'm not sure if Mitch is here somewhere. No. So some of yesterday talks and talking to people actually pushed myself to change the presentation. So some folks yesterday went to party and actually after party and came home at like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. I was also home at 4 a.m., not asleep. I was changing my presentation. So it's actually a good thing. Because I've decided like everyone will be probably tired. You're seeing so many great things. Like there's a lot of brilliant people here, a lot of code and slides, speaking, try to solve challenges. So yeah, now presentation will be light. You won't see any code from me. And yeah, probably good thing. And even you won't see probably anything related to JavaScript from me here. Ooh. Yeah, what's going to be a talk about? Yeah, so a little bit of story. So CrowdStrike is a cybersecurity company that appeared like 8 years ago. And we still kind of are a startup. Even though we are now 1,500 people, and some of you can think like, wow, it's not a startup. But the way how we operate and what we do, we believe that we are a startup. We build MVPs, we move forward to break things. I encourage everyone to break things. So what we do exactly is our main product, we have many different products, but our main product is a sensor that is installed in the machines. This sensor operates in a fashion, it scans everything that you do on your machine, all the events, and gives us information to what we can look at. And it's not private or proprietary information, it's mostly like things that we can act on or events on a system level as well. And we perform like real-time analysis on a machine and we send it back to the cloud, and from that cloud, this data gets into the UI, and this is where front-end part comes in. So, like, the presentation, how it's going to be here is actually around, like, hey, this is a field where front-end actually means a lot, and I will explain why. We currently actually have around 500 engineers working in different teams, and we are really split into different teams, and the teams that I never thought about that even existed before. And like a couple names that we use, like we have ontology team, the one that actually defines what kind of events we'll get from the kernel level, from sensor, will go back. These events that we can receive in the cloud and actually see in the front end. Then there will be like engine and content development team that writes special patterns to call, like to find the bad guys, bad interaction, something bad that happens in your system, and we again act on that. And the cloud team, pretty obvious, receives all the information, processes the information and sends it back to UI, where UX team gets in and actually does kind of magic. So also, to spark a little bit of interest, if we go away from these teams, we have teams that called intelligence. So from the name, we might think this is exactly what it means. We gather intelligence. We operate from a top down in terms of finding a bad guys, understanding what their intention is, what their goal is, and you'll see a little bit further what I mean. Also, we have interesting team called Overwatch. Again, probably you can guess what it means. We overwatch everything that happens all at once. And all the events that we gather from everywhere in one place, we analyze them, minimize them, and actually look at them. And this is where actually UI comes into play a lot. We do a lot of WebGL there. We process a lot of information. We use a lot of 3D graphics and actually charts to help our analysts to look and find the things that we are looking for in this like a huge sea, basically. And what's something special is all these people that I had to work with now, I would never think of, because for me, they basically exist only in the movies, because these people are ex-FBI, CIA, GCHQ, Ministry of Defenses. And yeah, these people work in cybersecurity. They're like ordinary people that you can see and work and interact with. So before going into UX side, I want to tell you a short story of real-world incident. And this basically, when I saw Mitch talk yesterday, I was like, oh, you can do that? You can talk about that? Yeah, sure. So, but again, my talk is not so close to, let's say, NPM, Node, or JavaScript. It's more of, for your awareness, what can happen or how it works, or like to say myself, oh, no one prepared me for this. Being aware is the first step to being safe, actually. And before, a little bit of terminology. So a threat actor or malicious actor is a person or entity that is responsible for an event or incident that impacts or has impact or has potential to impact the safety or security of another entity. A lot of words, blah, 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 but one bad person influences another good person and does harm. That's simple words. There are many threat actors out there, and they're split into different kind of groups, and all of them has code names. You know, like when you think cybersecurity, it's like a boring field, like there are people just on the machines. And these people want to have fun as well. So the first two groups that I'm going to show you is like activist groups and criminal groups. And this is like proper designs that we use to represent them. And first group, activists, they do bad things and they call jackals. So just for a moment, try to pronounce jackal many times in your head and try to associate what it means. Criminal groups are spiders. So this is just like arbitrary name. And this is another like design basically that represent these groups. Again, more to have fun and not be boring. So this specific one is actually called Wicked Spider. It's a suspected China-based adversary that likely operates as an exploitation group for hire, and it's actually hired by governments as well. These are like other designs, other groups, and if you can guess, I actually initially wanted to try, so you play a guessing game by countries. But, so yeah, Russia is bear, China's are pandas, Iran are kittens, don't ask why. North Korea is mythic thing, Cholima, tigers, leopards, buffalo. And now it's actually a story time, and probably some of you might even know this story, or at least heard something. This is not a new thing, happened a couple of years ago, but I will talk about intrusion into Democratic National Committee, DNC, and which actually, as some of you know, had some sort of influence into the US elections. So this incident is interesting about like a couple things, because there is a lot of controversy that you might think. You have a lot of questions, a lot of whys, and I'm not going to answer them, fortunately. But I'll just try to show how it actually works, or tell at least, not show. So in 2016, somewhere at one point, the DNC, they were not our client, or actually no one's client. So they called us and said like, hey, we actually suspect that something bad happened and we have a breach. That's not how breaches look like though. So, and our incident response team, they the same day flew there, started to look into the system, extracting information and trying to understand what's going on, deployed our sensor there. They don't even, before you want to get there, they already knew what's actually happening. And what was actually happening there was, it wasn't actually one hack, it was 2 hacks. And there were 2 different groups, but one was called Cozy Bear, and another one was called Fancy Bear. So the first one who tell me the country, I will give a swag. Russian. Everyone can get a swag. I have actually a lot of them. So, so what's so funny about that? I don't know who told, but I give you anyone. So, so what's so interesting about? I said 2016, right? And this is where everyone heard the news. But the actual hack of Cozy Bear happened in summer 2015. This group, Cozy Bear infiltrated them in summer 2015. They also infiltrated in the same year Unclassified Networks, important note, of the White House, State Department, and US Joint Chief of Staff. So by the things that they did, you probably can guess like what their agenda was. So Fancy Bear, they actually a separate Russian-based threat actor, which has been active since mid-2000s, so a long time ago, predates many of us. And they were responsible for targeting intrusion campaigns into different fields like aerospace, defense, energy, government, and media sectors. And by the agenda that we were targeting, you can kind of say that the profile closely mirrors the strategic interest of Russian government and may indicate affiliation with main intelligence department, or called GRU. Yeah, that was kind of, this was the slide I was talking about. That's fine. So one thing to note, which is actually fun fact, is that they were both in a system. They had no idea of each other in the system. They were not aware and operated completely independently, which is quite an unusual fact if you're an intelligence agency, right? Except if you're not 2 different intelligence agencies that actually compete, and compete probably for funding. So there were no collaboration, no information sharing, completely different times and different agendas. And if we compare the Western intelligence agencies going after the same target without deconfliction, they would actually have fear of compromising each other. So they try not to do that. And yeah, but that wasn't the case. So this is a Cozy Bear, not so fancy as every other design that we created. The tools that they used were actually super simple. Probably in a relation you can say cozy. So they were so simple that it was like, meh, it's easy. So it was like a PowerShell backdoors on Windows. Probably, I'm not going to go into details, it might not make any sense, but they were not using anything particular of interest of a big one. But what it was doing, it was like quite running and was like properly configured. It runs only after some time of uptime of the system, so it wasn't so easy to notice. And this one is actually a Fancy Bear, and we have design for it. And they are really advanced group. They use tools that they build themselves. These tools are super advanced to infiltrate the systems, and it's not only to infiltrate, to actually extract the data. And like if you think about any hack, it's not about like, hey, when you think about script kiddies, then yes, they just like do something for fun. But when it's a different level of things, it's not only infiltration, lateral movement inside the network, finding your target, but it's also extracting data, which depends of a lot of, when it's a lot of data, it's actually really hard to extract without someone noticing. I mean, try to download like gigabytes of something from somewhere, right? So they use like, yeah, they use like a lot of different advanced tools. And they actually succeeded in their goal, sort of. So, and when the kind of this intelligence like is directed to the point of like getting into and extracting data, there's all like there's affiliation that you can draw a line for. But it's also worth to mention that it's not just like a random guesses of the things. As I said, it's like mid 2000s, right? The groups were active. It means we have a lot of information and a lot of affiliation to different kind of jobs that we can put onto and understand that these tools that they used are actually belong to this specific actor. And yeah, because I actually added a little bit ad hoc, so I'm gonna stop it here, and if you're interested, we can talk about that later. One just like small fact or two small facts. For ones who can read in Russian, on the right-hand side it says aquarium. Who can't, it says aquarium. And this is not just by accident, just a small funny fact. The main GRU building in Russia by their employees is called aquarium. They call themselves we are an aquarium. And this comes from the actually old book of, which was done like in 80s or something. And there's like fun question, which fish swims in there? And the answer is there's only one type of it, piranhas. So, on this note, you can breathe. So, story time is actually over. I'm not gonna go actually in any more deep details. And we will go and talk about the UX team. And before going into that, so I'll kind of put a middle ground about the amount of data that we have to deal with. As I said, sensor collects information, collects data. So you probably all are aware of Twitter, right? You write tweets and you contribute, probably each of you who writes tweets or replies, you contribute to around 200 billion tweets a year, which is actually a huge number. Like it's even take every person in the world, it's like what, 30 times, even babies, right? So if you apply this same logic to us, we collect 250 billion events per day, which goes up to 91 trillion events per year. And this is like a huge sea pool of information that we work with. And again, small fact, we never said a word big data internally, never once. So let's make it a bit more warm and chill and relax. So let's talk about UX team, which is more of a kind of can be related to most of people here. 4 years ago, all that was just 3 people working, having maybe some contractors here and there, like coming into the project, doing some stuff. And now we're still not a big team, to be honest. Like from the UX perspective, we're just 40 people. And again, we're not 40 developers, which I'm going to talk about later on. We're just 40 people. And it's not only engineers, which is quite an important fact. It's all different roles that helps to succeed and make a successful front-end, to actually make a successful UX for customers. This, again, is a kind of important fact. And the stories I'm going to tell is more of like, so you can correlate and see and apply in your context, because I know there's like some people in much smaller teams, larger teams, but you can maybe use it as a middle ground to see where it's can go. And the first, that's probably a role like everyone has in their companies, right? And first thing to note, we are kind of remote first company. We have 40 people remote, 40 people on site, and 20 people who are here and there, basically. They go to office, not go to office. And our managers, they're responsible for project designation. Next one is interesting, is well-being, recruitment and coordination, both inside the team and across the teams. So they're not technical leads. I know that some people wished, I mean, not in our case, but even when I was previously like, hey, it would be so cool if this manager had any technical context, because it's not helping how they react. But their purpose is not to making decisions at all, it's to facilitate and coordinate. And we actually follow a management style, which is called servant leadership. Has anyone heard about it in the audience? Cool, 1, 2 people, nice. So we follow this style, and So what is it about? In a servant leadership culture, we learn by choice or example that if we want to be great, we have to serve others respectfully. And this is actually important. You might say it might be vague, but it makes perfect sense when you're in such environment. And what it actually looks like, it's on the right, it's more of a traditional style. Leader, management, employees, and then customers, and everyone pushes from the top to bottom. And in this style, okay, let's say, so in servant leadership, it's a very social leadership style. You actually communicate a lot. You talk a lot, and you're kind of like a great human being, basically. So while traditional leadership is about accumulating, hoarding, and exercising, which often like degenerates into abusing of power by the ones at the top, because someone said like, hey, I want it to be done like that. And the servant leadership is about the sharing power. So as you see, leaders on the bottom, so they have to share their power to achieve things with the people on top, and everything goes by sharing the power up, and the employees can push harder. And like the main questions that you can ask is, do this served grow as a persons? Do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to become a servant? And when you think about the autonomous, it's actually really important. Like, how many of you, let's say, are happy like being always told something what to do, right? So it's always nice to feel that your opinions matter and what you do matters. So yeah, this is kind of like a simple overview. I'm not going to go deep into this topic, but if it sparked some interest of you, that's great. One thing, like, take away from this, like, if you are working in a company or you're a manager, just curious to know, how many of you actually do one-on-ones with your or managers or employees? Like, you go for a coffee, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's awesome. Yeah. Maybe probably you have actually servant leadership. So yeah, others who don't do, just a small thing, just go grab a coffee, talk about the things. One main thing though is not about to over talk about the opponent, it's just to listen. That's it. Next one, that's the next person that we have in our team. And it's actually exactly what it is, kind of unicorn. I've talked to some people and they're like, what it is about? So it's about content strategy. And it's not only about like how text looks or word looks or what it means, but how it actually reads, how it communicated to customers. And I actually put it almost like after managers because it's very important on a level where if you have many teams, not just one team, you communicate by some occasions, right? You write code or you write everything else, you get to a point where you could have named one thing your way, another team could have named another thing their way, and then when you start to communicate, we kind of lose the understanding what one team did or another team did. So our content strategist participates in most of the meetings for big projects and listens to everyone and gathers words that people said and then build a glossary and gives these words to us. So we actually, when we build even code, we use the same words because that simplifies communication in the long run. Yeah, so that's like more of a small overview in this sense. Then another role is like, I believe many of you are aware of it, it's like UX researcher. I know a lot of people, like when we're studying in university, knew about that and then like, oh, probably we'll never use it. Or actually people not use the UX researcher because they know better themselves. But that's very important role for us. They're like, I would say they're like light of the end of the tunnel for us. They are involved in the very beginning of the project or even before that to identify customer problems. So it's not like, hey, we come up with an idea and just like, let's make it and do it. You actually talk to customers. And I would say I saw it actually working just now properly, and I'm happy that it actually works and it's not a myth. So UX researchers work with managers to identify and customers for benchmarking and testing as well. So when you do any project, we not only like, hey, we ask something, but then we reiterate, and we ask more questions, and then we validate. And UX researcher works closely with UX designer. Again, probably there is nothing that I can say that will spark anything, but UX designers, they understand the user problems and motivation in order to translate that into interactive experiences and to improve what customer tries to accomplish. And interactive experiences, that's actually like a key thing, because as you can see now, there is more and more things that's more of like in interactive fashion. They also write stories. Surprise, surprise. They produce user flows, wireframes, and prototypes, and we actually build our own like design system as well, because on a scale of kind of front-end part, even with a small amount of developers, we do a lot of applications. I will share it later. And we also call ourselves a UX team. As you see, I never probably mentioned, if that by mistake, UI. It's just UX team for a reason, because everyone is responsible for user experience. From any role that you have, on every meeting, we have actually iteration sessions for UX. And everyone, designer, developer, goes in and debate what can be done, and we actually listen for people. So next one is visual designer. They're problem solvers of the design world. They bring brands to life. They play the key role in defining what goes into brands' unique style and voice. In addition to creating beautiful designs, they know how to explain design concepts and decisions behind their work. And everything that I'm like talking here about is more of like to show like, hey, these are actually all different people, and they're different for a reason. How many of you actually care about accessibility? Like, how many of you actually write code that is accessible? Don't be shy, raise your hand. I want to feel joy for people. Yes, that's actually very important. And it goes to a point that it means you care about people that you might not be even aware of, right? The people, there's like a lot of different disabilities and impairments that actually prevents people to use the products. And we have like a separate person. Like every UX engineer that we have, they're like kind of accessibility engineer, but being 100% knowledgeable of all the things that needs to be done properly is a little bit more hard when you go into more complicated UX, like user experiences. So yes, we have a person who actually oversees that, and like we work in the terms of like even every PR that we create, accessibility engineer can jump in, do kind of QA, and suggest the fix or suggest a better solution. If you're not doing accessibility, one thing just to think about, it's really hard to smack accessibility later on your code. What is better to think about it before, and thinking is sometimes really simple. It's just don't create divs instead of buttons with on-clicks on them. So just like a simple things like that, don't hijack clicks. So everything related about the events, when you'll have to do accessibility, you'll feel pain, speaking from experience. So UX engineer, how many are UX engineers? Front-end engineers, UI developers, how you call yourselves? 1, 2, 3. Who is everyone else? Cool. So yeah, UX engineers, probably you're all aware what they are doing, what their roles playing, writing code, probably React, probably every other framework. There is like no point in holy war or battle about which framework is better. So we operate in a fashion of, again, it's more of a respect. It's more of like, it's PR fashion. When you write PRs, it's all about how you interact with other people. You might think I'm like too deep into soft skills, but as I said, I believe a lot of people here are brilliant engineers, but knowing like that the soft skills matters is actually really important. And for us, we have like actually whole kind of guidelines and rules how we even write comments in PRs, how we interact with people, what are steps, like if you want to explain something. And also, if you're in a remote fashion, you probably kind of have this like feeling, oh, it's actually hard to work in remote, because the interactions, there's a lot more interactions that you need to do to be successful. You need to jump into calls because it's actually sometimes very ambiguous in a chat when someone wrote one thing and you're like, what they meant. And it's better not to escalate, but just go and see a person face to face and in a calm, good manner, just explain what you meant. QA engineers, it's a generally person whom primary concern is maximizing quality of final product. And QA engineers, they should take quality as a part of their heart. They're not on, they shouldn't be only interested like in a business logic, but how product feels, what is user experience, how well it can be used or quick, or to understand the concept of it as well, and actually like feed it back to design team and engineering team and actually fix what kind of suggestions were made. The next one is technical writer. This role is actually interesting because not everyone needs them. Like a lot of people can actually survive without technical writers specifically. Like it's a role on like a bit different level when you have like a lot of things that you need to share. You need to tell your customers how something works, and sometimes when it's what you build is complex, then probably you need to go in that field and try to like explain it to your customers. And from experience, I can tell that the customers are afraid of everything. They are afraid of your product, and if you think they are not, I'm curious. So yeah, just like from experience, that's like what I saw. Like first, they also don't read documentation, even though you kind of have to write it. And when they see a button, and they can't, from a name of a button or understanding what it does, they're not going to even click on it. And I personally heard the feedback, which is like, I'm not clicking on that button. I'm not sure what's going to happen next. Even though our UI is not destructive, that was painful to hear. So that's probably kind of all about the different roles. I'm curious, anyone here, do you have like correlation? How many of these roles actually like apply to you? How many roles of like you have the same roles in your teams or your company? Do you have like 3, 4 from these ones? 3, 4, 5? 5. Cool. I see one person raising hands. Are you working with me? Cool. So front-end part. I promised I'm not going to talk about the front-end much and nothing technical. And you might not like me after what I'm going to say because I'm not a React guy. I respect React. Should I say I like hooks so everyone likes me? Hooks are good? Yeah? Okay, cool. Hooks are good. I'm not actually, I'm joking. The hooks are actually good and they were kind of ported into Ember. I'm using EmberJs and our team uses EmberJs, and we did that deliberate choice long time ago, and I somehow feel that it works for us. I'm not going to push it to anyone, but if you're interested, Ember is not dead. It's pretty much alive, and it was always like this hamster going and rolling, just sometimes slower, sometimes faster. We actually have, for context, 16 different applications, internal and external, that the team of just like 40 people supports. And from them, we have like 20 engineers who work on these applications. We try to share as much code as possible. We have like libraries, we host our private NPM. And what Mitch was explaining yesterday, we actually experienced that, but we were, let's say, a bit more lucky in this NPM hug, because we never use carrots in package.jsons, for example. We always lock down on a specific version. We also use yarn with strict lock. So yeah, that's my kind of takeaway from a Mitch talk and suggestion to you, just be super strict. From the libraries, like 3 biggest things that we have is we use a lot of WebGL. That's probably kind of drives because of how much data we have, and browsers kind of sucks to just render it in DOM. And data layer, because we are microservices architecture, and it's kind of painful for UI, to be honest. So if we would have a GraphQL, that would be awesome. Because like, hey, we can do one call, right? But in reality, when we open a detection, we can do from 400 to around 1,000 calls to different APIs to gather all the information we need and to show. You can imagine the pain. About the Ember, just like a couple notes that we were curious about. Maybe it will apply to you. I'm not sure if React has that like specifically, but long-term support versions. That was a killer thing for us because every time our product doesn't work, for God knows what reason, customers are unhappy, and we can say like, hey guys, you're protected. Commitment of the Ember team as well is quite good. It wasn't great at some points of time, but now we believe it's kind of awesome. Separation of concerns, it's like a great things that I really like in terms of like, hey, these things means one, JS is JS, templates are templates, CSS is CSS. I know people can disagree with me. Ember CLI was great. It was ported to Angular. I don't know if it's still alive. And the React using Create React App, also awesome thing. And the last note, but not the least, that's kind of a thing for us, but I know a lot of you are using TypeScript. Like, how many of you actually converted to TypeScript? Whoa, that's cool, nice. So yeah, the TypeScript, as we see it, and it's kind of like intake for Frontend, we believe it's a big thing for us, and I believe it's a big thing for a lot of you as well, as you're using it. In terms of like, because we work with a lot of data, we want to be sure which models we can use, what fields, how they are typed, and actually the big refactoring as well. Like if you have small team, but you have a lot of code that you want to do, you don't want to lock yourself out of refactoring and making like code better. And this actually, that's it, as much as it goes. I'll finish quite earlier. Probably I'll finish a little bit earlier. I hope it was at least insightful, and I've deliberately put some things more from the one side of the things that we are experiencing, and if you're curious to know more, I can tell you of the presentation or answer the questions.
All right, thanks.